Stuck-on food is the worst, right? Manufacturers of nonstick cookware and dish soap have spent millions selling us on this. Me, I'm kind of torn on this one. I've scrubbed my share of pots and pans and it is no fun. But I've also had plenty of food that was amazing because of sticking. Let's look at three things. First, why does food stick to cookware? Second, how do we prevent sticking? And finally, third, when is it good that food sticks? There's a lot going on when you put a piece of meat into a skillet to cook it. Imagine that these little bendy tubes here are a piece of meat and each individual tube is a protein. Now, they're going to have little portions that are going to be attracted to metal. As you cook the meat, the proteins are going to change shapes. They just kind of unwind and coil, and that exposes these bits that will then bond to the pan. When enough of these little edges open up and stick to the pan, that's what you're seeing when meat sticks. But if you continue to cook the meat, those proteins, they're going to continue to change shape. And as they morph and more of these bits are exposed, they'll start to bond with each other, kind of like this. And when they all bond with each other, they release from the pan and the whole piece of meat can be lifted from the skillet. There are a few ways to prevent sticking, and they all involve placing a barrier between the food and the metal. Nonstick cookware is coated in films that aren't attractive to food. Cooking in cast iron and carbon steel puts a patina of polymerized oil on the pans. They're also great barriers. And even a thin film of oil is pretty effective. Let's look at how effective. I developed a recipe for French toast that lets you make 8 slices at the same time by using the oven. We start by coating a baking sheet with cooking spray, and then we add the custard and soak the bread right in that sheet. This goes in the oven where the slices bake until the bottom side is browned. To finish, we broil to brown the top. How come we can soak and bake the French toast in the same pan? The key is the cooking spray. The spray I used contains lecithin, a surfactant. It reduces the surface tension of the oil, helping it spread and form a thin, even barrier rather than beading. That's effective enough to keep any of the egg-milk mixture that isn't absorbed by the bread from sticking to the pan, which ultimately means less cleanup for us. This French toast is fantastic. It's not fantastic because it didn't stick. The cooking spray doesn't do that for us. What it does do is it makes cleanup easier, and being able to make all 8 slices at the same time means that I get to sit down and eat with everybody else instead of having to stand at the stove making 1 slice at a time. Now, being a great cook doesn't mean you have to do everything you can to prevent sticking. Sometimes you just gotta let it happen. I said earlier that there are some foods out there that are better because of sticking. Now, some great examples of this are pan sauces and gravies. They're both built from the fond that's left behind when you sear meat. If you cook in a nonstick skillet and most of the brown bits stick to the meat, that's going to mean your pan sauce is going to be lacking in color and flavor. For more details, you can check out my videos on side fond and pan sauces. Another instance where sticking should be encouraged is when you're making smashed burgers. Now, when I was developing this recipe, I would add my oil to my cast iron skillet and heat it up over medium-high heat and wait for it to smoke. After it started to smoke, I'd add the meat and then I'd smash the burgers. And what would happen was the patties would kind of contract slowly as they cooked, and they became thicker, they lost their lacy edges. They were good, but they weren't exactly what I was looking for. Eventually, what I realized was, as soon as I saw smoke rise from the skillet, I was done with the oil. It was time to wipe all that oil away to make sure that the burgers stick. So I'm taking the time to really go at this, and I want this skillet to look dry. It's looking pretty good. I like to use store-bought ground meat for this. It's a little bit more finely ground, which means there's more myosin developed. That sticky protein is what helps these burgers stay together after they're smashed. So we'll add our 2 little 2-ounce portions. I like to smash with a saucepan covered in foil. It lets me push straight down and I have better control that way. Season these up. You can see they're retaining their shape really nicely instead of contracting into like little discs. They also have these beautiful lacy edges, which is just so much great texture. That one's about 3/4 cooked through. I'm gonna just scrape it up and give it a flip. Now, because they're so thin, they're gonna cook through really quickly. Add a little bit of American cheese. Check out how delicate this edge is. It's gonna retain its texture beautifully, and that's my favorite part of a smash burger. I could eat smash burgers all day. Making sure those patties stick is what keeps these burgers lacing and delicious. Sticking doesn't just make for savory burgers and delicious pan sauces. It can also be really important for the appearance of baked goods. I recently developed an ice cream cake recipe where the bottom layer is chiffon cake. And having that cake stick to the sides of the pan, that turned out to be the key to keeping its sides vertical. I used cooking spray to glue parchment to the bottom of a springform pan, but otherwise I left the pan alone. The cake batter climbs nicely as it bakes, and when I let it cool slightly before removing it from the pan, which is what you would usually do, the sides are going to cave in like this. Why would sticking prevent that? Well, this cake expands in the oven partially because of steam and hot air, and if you let the air cool and the steam condense to water, they're going to take up less space, and without them pushing on the starch, oil, sugar, and proteins that make up a cake, the cake's going to shrink. Letting the cake stick to the pan allows us to keep tension across the top of the cake, and it'll cool and set up in that shape, which is what keeps the sides from doing this. So it's a minor cosmetic thing, but I love how geometric this is. You've just got these beautiful clean lines. The layers are super distinct. You've got the fudgy chocolate sauce. The cake looks beautifully squared off, and I think that lets the mix-ins and the ice cream really shine because they're bringing other shapes. I just need a second, sorry. If you grew up on Carvel cakes, they're lovely. That crumb layer is great, but a chiffon cake layer underneath your ice cream cake, it's just better. Letting food stick is kind of counterintuitive given how much hype nonstick, cast iron, and carbon steel get. And I'm not saying you should throw out your nonstick or let the carbon steel rust. Just know that there are times when it's more than okay to let your food stick. It's a pretty nice cake, huh? I just want to eat ice cream cake all day. If you've got a friend who won't give up their nonstick skillet, please share this video with them. And if there are any topics you'd like me to cover, let me know in the comments.